Welcome to Visionary Voices, a podcast where we connect with forward-thinking entrepreneurs to learn from their stories. You might think entrepreneurship is a bed of roses, but these entrepreneurs are about to tell you that it is not. And they are here to share their stories with you so you can learn and implement and go do better. Enjoy!
You have to be a little crazy to be an entrepreneur because I was thinking about it and I had a very cushy job. It paid extremely well. I could have worked at that job the rest of my life. In fact, my parents, I think I see this a lot with children of immigrants or even people who immigrated recently. My parents were like, just work at your 9-to-5 forever. Like, don't change anything. Just have this business on the side and work your 9-to-5 forever. And I was like, what? And I'm like, how am I gonna grow this business to like $1 million? How am I gonna help like 300 women if I still have a 9-to-5? And they were like, just figure it out. And I was like, something was not clicking.
Yeah.
So I think you're right. You do need to have a passion and your why. When you're in the trenches and you feel like you can't go on anymore, you need a really good support system and you need a really good why. Something that helps you keep going in like the dark nights where you're like, what is going to happen next? To bring you back to the light.
If you're afraid of success, you'll do everything, and then when it's time for you to actually get the fruit of your labor, you'll sabotage yourself. And we see this so much with a lot of the people we work with, where they can be very hardworking. They will build an entire business funnel, an entire business system, and the day they're supposed to turn it on, all of a sudden they have a cold, their body shuts down, they can't function that time. It's like something will always happen, or that's when they need to do laundry, clean the office, travel, go on vacation. I remember one of our clients, we helped her scale her business. She had been wanting to scale for a very long time. And she came to work with us and she had been averaging about $30,000 for the month in her business. We helped her to do $65,000 in a week. And right after, and people were like rushing into her business. Yeah. And in the middle of this rush into her business, I remember she was like, hey, Toyin, so I'm going to take a vacation. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? And she's like, there's just so many people coming in. I'm just going to take a vacation and I'll come back. And I literally said, sis, this is sabotage in the textbook form. Right. Because if you spend years building for a moment, many of us in that moment, something comes up that causes us to think, I don't deserve this. It's too much for me. I can't handle this level of success. And we start wanting to shy back. Thankfully for her, she had us in her corner so we could actually call it out. But for many business owners that are by themselves, they have those moments where they've worked and they've worked and they've worked and they get to the fruit. And that's when they literally will start to create drama in their marriage with their children just to have something else to do that's not the business that they already built and did the work for.
It didn't occur to me that I was like an entrepreneur or I was starting businesses. It really felt more like, I'm doing this project. Mm-hmm. So in hindsight, the first business that I started is when I was, 12 years old. And the context there is that, I was in school. I was in high school at the time. And my parents would give me $2 to get lunch at the cafeteria. Mm-hmm. And there were different options in the cafeteria. And $2 could get you a fine lunch. But the option I really liked was $3. And I wanted to get that lunch, but I couldn't afford it. Yeah. And I noticed something. My friend would go every day and he would buy a Coke for $1. And I was like, that's interesting. He doesn't like Coke. So what's going on, right? But I knew that he liked cream soda and they didn't have cream soda at the cafeteria. So I figured out that I could go to Costco and I could get a tray of, cans of cream soda for very little. And I could bring it to school and I can give it to my friend. He'd give me the $1 that he was going to give to the cafeteria to get something he didn't want anyway. And then I have $3 and then I can buy the thing that I actually wanted to eat.
Whoa.
So that was my first business. It generated $5 of weekly profit and it operated until I moved away at the end of the year. So that was my first business.
You were 12 years old?
I was 12 years old.
I think the biggest issue is waiting 5 years or waiting until you're burnt out to actually hand off a lot of the things that you've been waiting on. And I can even speak about myself. I tried to DIY a lot of the team systems and automation work for a very long time, and it caused me a lot of mental health, personal issues. And I could have saved myself a lot of heartache if I just had swallowed my pride and asked for some help. I think that's the biggest roadblock for a lot of financial experts. They don't want to ask for help because they're not at that burnout period yet. And I'm like, why do you need to burn out before you ask for help?
One thing I learned in scaling as fast as we have is that the limiting beliefs between we ain't making no money to 150,000 was what I had in the beginning. You know, I can't have more than enough money, otherwise I'm going to be pulled away from God, and he's my top value, you know, blah blah blah. Right. Those limiting beliefs. But then the limiting belief between 150,000 a year and 500,000 a year is also different. The limiting belief between 500,000 a year and 2 million a year is different. The limiting belief between 2 million a year and 10 million a year is different. You literally, for every level that your business is multiplying into, your brain has to do this process. So every single year, myself, all of my clients, well, the ones that will do it, most of them, will do this program, Money Mindset Shift, over again once we know what the next level play is. So even for me, every year I take 7 days in the beginning of the year alone with God, and I will say, okay, what's the goal for this year? What are we going to do financially? What's the level of impact we're going to have? How many lives are we going to change? And then once I've designated all those things, then I sit with my brain. Right. And I'm like, okay, great. Now what are the limiting beliefs that come up when I look at this? And it's just so different every year for me, which I just think it's incredible the way that God has built our brain. But it's also incredible how our brains, like, there's so many layers to freedom. Because for me, running a business isn't just about making money. Running a business is seeing your level of potential, your level of like changing the way you're showing up in the world, changing the way that you think. Business is like the ultimate personal development process you could ever put yourself through, because it forces you to interface with the world, to interface with the market, to lead teams and learn leadership, and then to learn self-leadership. How do you lead yourself in the midst of everything that you got to get done? It's incredible.
When I first quit school, I was like, I'm going to do something constructive with my time. What can I do? I'm 15. I don't have a lot of marketable skills. But I knew HTML. And so anyone who's listening to this who knows anything about technology knows that basically means I knew nothing.
Yeah. Right?
It's not, there's no complicated logic. You're not writing programming or anything. It's very simple.
Okay.
But I knew how to build very simple, rudimentary web pages. And I figured, okay, so I'll do that. I'll start a business building web pages for businesses. So I went door to door to all the shops in my neighborhood, and I asked them, hey, do you need a website?
Wow.
And this is how young and like just oblivious I was. It didn't even occur to me that the clerk at the counter is not the person who makes that decision. Right? So that went nowhere. I didn't get any business at all. And then one day I'm sitting at home with, or rather at a friend's house, we're playing some educational game with his little sister. And he points at the screen. He says, Danny, this is pretty simple. I'll bet you could build a game like this. And I tell him, I'll bet I could. Mm-hmm. Now, as an aside, I had none of the requisite skills, so I probably could not have. But I was like, sure, how hard can it be?
Yeah.
Right? So we find the box. This is back when, software was sold in boxes that come in shrink wrap.
Yeah.
So I find the box. I call up the company. I get a meeting with the CEO. This is one of those things that in hindsight, I'm like, how in the hell did I do that? Mm-hmm. But at the time, it just didn't even occur to me that this was a big deal. So it literally didn't register. I guess I called them and made the appointment. I don't know.
Yeah.
I go in there. I'm 15 years old. I sit down with the CEO. I shake his hand. I tell him, I have a business proposition for you. I think I can build the games that you sell.
Could you?
No. But I figured I could figure it out.
Okay.
But it continues, right? So my mom has a degree in psychology. So I tell him I've conferred with a psychologist. And I've come to the conclusion that if you really want kids to learn, they should be having fun, and the learning happens in the background. They shouldn't be doing, math exercises on the screen.
Well, that's true.
It is true. Now, what he could have said was, no kidding, I've been doing this for 10 years, get out of my office. But instead of that, he says, okay, he opens a drawer, he pulls out a document, he blows on it, and like a cloud of dust flies off it. He says, this is a script that I wrote for a game 8 years ago. Why don't you build it and we'll sell it? And I say, that sounds great.
Okay.
And he says, so how are you going to build it? And I had no technical skills, but I had a friend who knew Visual Basic, so I knew of Visual Basic. I thought my friend might teach me. I said, I'll build it in Visual Basic. And he says, isn't that like reinventing the wheel? Why don't you build it in Director?
Okay.
So I tell him, look, if we're going to be working together, then of course I have to adapt to your business practices. So no problem, I'll build it in Director. So we shook hands, he drew up, some boilerplate LOI or something that we signed. I walk home, I open up Google, which was brand new, and I type in, what is Director?
You're pretty much winging everything right there.
Yep. And I feel like that's so here's the thing. There are people who, when they're asked the question, can you do this? They think what you're being asked is for an assessment of your current capabilities. There are other people who, when asked, can you do this? They feel like what you're asking for is how plausible it is that you could acquire the skills in the time frame required. Okay. And I think that's how entrepreneurs think about this.
True.
So it doesn't matter if I can do it right now. It matters if I can plausibly figure out how to do it by the time I'd need to.
Yeah, which is about being resourceful. Yeah. For more insightful conversations with entrepreneurs, check out this video right here. I think you'll love it. Continue to enjoy, and I'll see you there.